main thing you got to understand is that the movie Freaks would be utterly impossible once the code comes in for a lot of reasons, and it was barely possible before the code.
I was gonna say even pre-code, barely possible.
Because MGM, like people who were on set, and they were like, this makes us very uncomfortable. We don't want to see any of this.
We accept a one of us. We accept a one of us.
Gooba gobble, gooba gobble.
We accept her. We accept her. Google gobble. Google gobble. One of us. One of us. Google gobble.
Today on Midnight Local, we are going to talk about Freaks, another pre-code film made in 1992. Greg, this is your recommendation. Why Freaks?
Freaks was made in 1932, Meredith.
Did I say 92?
You did.
1992.
Good year for cinema.
Classic Freaks.
But not Freaks. Why Freaks? Well, one, so we're talking about pre-code stuff and shit that you could get away with between 1930 and 1934 that you couldn't get away with another time. Freaks is riding high. Freaks is way up there in terms of what you could and couldn't do, particularly as it pertains to the horror genre. Two, Freaks is probably a movie that you will discuss if you go to film school. That's a film school movie.
I didn't. You are the first. This is the first. Ray, all over it, knew exactly what I was talking about, had seen it. This one, my teachers failed me. Every single one of them failed me.
I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know.
Maybe you were asleep in class. I slept through film history heavily.
I would just always. So I took a film and literature class, or like films drive, and we would watch the movie in class, and I would just leave because like I can watch the movie at home. I come to class to like talk about the movie.
Yeah.
So I would like watch the movie sometime that week, but it was an early morning class, so I would go over the discussion, go home, and go back to bed.
I had Dan Mercutio for Film and Lit, and he began class by saying, "Hi, I'm Dan Mercutio. I am an aggressive anarchist, and I use my class to push my ideals and make you into anarchists. I believe in a ballot in every hand and a bomb in every pocket. Let's go. This is Film and Lit." And he is fucking crazy. But in truth, he is the reason that I'm so up on pre-code movies and Warner Brothers in particular. He really introduced me to all of that. But he's fucking crazy.
All right, how do we get here? What happened?
Film school, Freaks. Okay, I can't believe you didn't get introduced to Freaks during film school.
Yeah, didn't happen.
Right. 1932, MGM movie directed by Todd Browning, which matters because Todd Browning directed Dracula. Thank you. And it matters that it's MGM because MGM is not famous for doing horror movies at all. Freaks, which is perhaps a term that is now a bit gauche, out of date, is a film about a circus, and particularly the sideshow of that circus and the people who are on that sideshow of that circus. And truly, there's a framing story. The movie begins in a sideshow, and the Barker is introducing the guests of this sideshow to something that we do not see. And then he tells the story of how this creature came to be. And that's when we flash back into the story of Freaks.
I think it's very important for like the entire context of discussing this movie going forward that Browning left his home as a young man and traveled with the circus.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
He loved these people. Like these are his people. So I think like the whole context of the movie should be looked at knowing that.
And two, sideshow people are still a thing. Obviously, they have a lot more agency than they used to. Like in this time, you kind of bought and sold your sideshow people. But it's an interesting thing because it's one of those places where people who try to soften the language around it are often, and this has just been my observation and what I've read about the subject, rebuked by the actual sideshow performers themselves, who would insist, no, we are freaks. Please do not come at us with your agenda. This is a long-standing performative tradition of the theater, of circus, and like, we're the freak show. It's okay. That's your problem that you don't like that.
Yeah.
That kind of an attitude.
Museum to that effect on Coney Island. It used to be a big part of Coney Island was the freak show, and there's a bunch of landmarks dedicated to that still, like a diner and a museum and maybe even still a performance. I'm not sure. I've never seen it if it is.
Yes. There's a great episode of The X-Files that takes place during in a freak show community as well.
Right.
Yeah, you come to that in season 2, I think, or 3. It's a pretty good
Maybe
episode.
we'll do an X-Files today.
Might be able to squeeze one in. So, yeah. So why is this movie pre-code? We've kind of talked about the code already and what that means. If you want to, we should put a link or something, because I'm not going to break down the entire history of the code.
I'll have like a graphic scroll every time we talk about it that just goes across the screen.
Anyway, a lot of people are listening to this on a podcast, but suffice to say,
Also
after 1934, the Catholic Church basically got to decide what was in your movies and what wasn't in your movies. And like, that's just, there was not a damn thing you could do about it. We had government mandated, or we had censorship in cinema from 1935 until 1968.
Here's something we didn't talk about in Frankenstein about the code, which might offer some clarity if you know, but it's the Hays Code created. Who was Hays?
And also the Hays Code was regarded as a compromise because there was a concern that the government was going to come in and censor movies, and the Hays Code was a self-censorship that the studios were adopting themselves. It's popularly known as the Hays Code after Will H. Hays, who was president of the MPPDA, Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, from 92 to 45. From 1934 to 1945, the code was identified with Joseph Breen, who was the administrator appointed by Hays to enforce the code in Hollywood. So Breen comes up all the time because he was literally the goalie, or the referee. He was the guy deciding what passed the code and what didn't. He had exclusive carte blanche to do so.
Hays, chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Yeah,
RNC from 1918 to 1921.
Yeah, so he was heavily implicated, if I'm not mistaken, in all of the scandals around the Warren G. Harding? Hoover administration and the Teapot Dome scandal. Perhaps one of the architects of the Great Depression. Very quickly, things you can't do, don'ts. No pointed profanity. You can't say God, Lord, Jesus Christ, unless they're hell, SOB, damn, God, and every other profane or vulgar expression. You could not have licentious or suggestive nudity, the illegal traffic in drugs, any inference of sex perversion, which means gay people, trans people, etc. 3 ways, by the way. Divorce,
even so much less of that premarital sex, living together before marriage.
No depiction of white slavery.
Yeah, I know. I love how that's specified.
No depictions of miscegenation. That means interracial relations.
Yeah.
No depictions of sexual hygiene or venereal diseases. No scenes of childbirth.
Because how dare child be, how raunchy it is to give birth to a child.
Yeah. I think also at that time, women gave birth under anesthesia. It was just like, okay, go to bed. You're going to wake you up and have a baby later.
I don't blame them at all.
Yeah. Scenes of actual childbirth. No scenes of child sex organs. Yeah, okay.
Good. Good.
No ridicule of the clergy. No willful offense to any nation, race, or creed, but really we actually mean the white people and their race and creed. Be careful how you use the flag or around international relations. Be careful how you use arson or the fire. Anyway, long story short, it was highly restrictive and subject to interpretation. There we have it. Moving on. The main thing you got to understand is that the movie Freaks would be utterly impossible once the code comes in for a lot of reasons, and it was barely possible before the code.
I was gonna say even pre-code, barely possible.
Because MGM, like people who were on set and they're like, this makes us very uncomfortable. Yeah. We don't want to see any of this.
Well, so the original screened cut of the movie was 90 minutes, and after that screening it got cut down to 60 minutes.
Yeah, a lot of stuff got tossed. A real three-reeler.
Gone
forever gone, not restorable. So briefly, what is the plot here? She's a tightrope walker, or is she
she's a trapeze artist.
Trapeze artist. Okay, so we've got this Teutonic trapeze artist who is moving in on a little person who is the head of the freaky sideshow. The freaks, right? I don't know why you threw your arms up like there was a big thing there.
No, I was just saying the whole movie's a flashback. You get this setup at the beginning. Yeah. Did you say what they're setting? Like he says, this is how this person got this way.
I set that up, but we could set it up again, Mary. We could do it again. Yeah, so down in a box, there's some freak that we can't see that is being introduced to the audience at the freak show, that the Barker's like, behold this woman, princes of Europe killed themselves for her love. Look what has become, whatever, this monster. And we never see her. So flashback to how this happened. And at this point, by the way, we don't know who
it is.
Yeah, we don't know who's in the box. So the framing story is really just there to set up the reveal in the third act, or really just the denouement, the closing energy, because the third act actually happens in the flashback. It does add an extra layer of like, oh God, into this movie though. Like the movie works without it. You could literally take off the bookends, but without it, it cranks it up to 11.
I think you need it. Yeah, I think I have a really hard time calling this horror at all. That kind of pushes it over the edge.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I have a hard time. I don't know that it's true. It's weird because the definition of horror has changed. Like horror at this time was like, it's unsettling. And now horror is, it's scary.
Yeah.
I think that they switched it up.
And at the end, like the last 10 minutes of the movie are definitely horror, but leading up to then, it's...
Oh God. The end of this movie is both gorgeous and unsettling indeed. So the non-freaks are our trapeze artist, our pretty girl, and I literally think she might be a stripper. I think she's a stripper, honestly, because circuses would have strippers.
Yeah, they never really. I don't remember. The first scene I remember her being in is when she's getting broken up with.
I think her job is to dance and look
Hercules.
pretty. You know, she does the dance of the seven veils or something. That, unless we missed it, it could have been a blink and you miss it moment. You got the strong man Hercules. Arguably he's part of the sideshow, but not really. That's sort of, main ring circus stuff. And then you've got the clown, Bezo, Friezo?
Forso. So there's a lot of accents and the sound's not great in this movie, so
absolutely.
it's hard to make out. We watched it with the captions on. It kept sounding like they were saying torso to me.
Frozo. Phroso. Frozo. Those are your non-freaks.
And Roscoe, kind of. He's got the stutter, but...
Oh, yeah, he's the stuttering guy. You've got Hans and his wife, who they're both little people. Frida and Cleopatra. She is moving in on Hans and like getting money from him and stuff.
You don't really get that yet. At first, the first meeting between the two of them, she's just kind of flirty with him, and I was actually kind of hopeful that the reason this movie was considered sort of like pre-code is
Ditto.
is that like she was kind of into it, and she's showing a lot of shoulder, showing a lot of skin that was immediately apparent in ways that I think she would have been covered up just a couple years later.
Maybe not as a villain. You could go either way. It depended on if Breen had his coffee or not that day. I'm serious. But yeah, I had the exact same thought. I was like, oh, maybe that was like, that's a thing here. Is it like we're gonna see relations, a loving relationship between a little person and a big person. By the way, little person, that term comes into vogue because of Billy Barty, famous child and little person actor from the pre-code, mostly in Warner Brothers movies. It was a term he coined, and he was a huge advocate for little people in Hollywood. That's where that comes from, and I just think it's cool that has actually even roots to just this place and time in cinema. He's not in this movie.
But he was acting at this time.
Oh, yeah. There is a couple little people in this movie, namely Frida, Hans, and then I got to look up the other one.
Was it Angelo?
Angelo, yeah. Where is
Rosito.
he? If you have seen Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, he is master. And so I just think it's so cool to see these people who are working in these pre-code movies that, they're still working in the 80s and the 90s. I think that's fun. Master Blaster. He's got the mind of a child. Oh, God.
Well, and he's kind of got the most memorable scene in the movie.
Yeah. He's great in this movie. Basically, the plot revolves around Cleopatra moving in on Hans and Frida's marriage, stealing Hans from Frida. At first, because of a cruel game. Then she borrows money from him. Then she finds out that he's actually fabulously wealthy.
Well, she's tricking him into bringing her gifts. He's bringing her flowers, and she wants champagne, so she gets him to bring her champagne. And also during this time, her and Hercules strike up a relationship.
Right. Hercules is with our pretty girl. Venus, thank you. Yeah, it's synonymous. Venus, pretty girl. There you go.
The pretty girl.
Yeah, but the dancing girls, beautiful dancing girls. Yeah, no, Venus and Hercules initially are in a relationship, and they break up because he's a piece of... Yeah, and it's like, honestly, she is so nice, and he is such a piece of shit. It's hard to conceptualize how they ever happened. Like, I don't even get it. But that's okay. That's not in the movie. That's before frame one. We don't need to worry about it.
She tells him, like, there's a line where
this is the last money you're going to get from me.
I'm not giving you any more of my time and money. And she says something like, it was your time and my money or something like that.
That's right.
Because he's not giving her any time and she's the one with the money is the implication.
See, to me, that's like, this is MGM. In recording time, we just got done talking about Frankenstein. And I'm bringing that up because one of the things I said was so boring about Frankenstein for me is that the dialogue is not witty. It's not snappy. It's got no life to it. You know, Warner Brothers had that. And if that's what you're expecting, like a Warner Brothers vibe going into Frankenstein, you're going to be bored. And Freaks is MGM, but it feels way more like Warner Brothers.
It is snappy. Yeah, I agree. But also immediately you are depicting a relationship outside of marriage. You assume that they live together. She gathers her stuff and goes and huff out of his room.
And then we meet Frozzo, the clown, who's another super cool dude. He's just genuinely a nice person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really it, right? So the main thing is here, we got the Sideshow. We got Frozzo and Venus, whom are really nice to the Sideshow people. They are co-workers and they don't treat them as outsiders at all. And then you've got Hercules and Cleopatra who hate the freaks and are monsters.
I got the idea that Cleopatra was kind of new to the scene because Frida says to Hans at some point, like, you've never talked to me like this before. You've never treated me like this before. Right. And it's like he's been taken by this beautiful woman who's giving him attention and it's affecting every part of his life.
I think that the thing that the movie's most famous for is the use of real freaks, for lack of, well, actually not for lack of a better word. There's plenty of better words, but I think that as we established, like in the Sideshow community, that's an accepted term of art. And famous ones too. A lot of these people were circus performers. Hans and his wife Frida, actually brother and sister in real life, which is probably why they have no fucking chemistry at all, and it's awkward as hell to watch.
That's cited frequently, yeah.
I mean, they are... Look, man, they're the weakest actors in this movie. Not for nothing. They're not.
And it's a cast of non-actors for the most part. Like this,
exactly.
You're not really watching this movie for the performances or the filmmaking necessarily.
Yeah, the acting rests on the shoulders of the non-freaks, basically, whom are actors. But you've got Hans and Frida. You've got Johnny Eck, the half boy,
who, wow, he's incredible.
Yeah, he is. Not actually, you're watching the movie and you think, oh my God, how did he survive being cut in half? No, he was born that way and he has tiny little vestigial feet underneath his torso.
He does, okay.
Yeah.
But the way he moves is just incredible to me.
He's the one who walks on his hands.
Yeah, but like
at full speed.
He swings himself around. Oh, yeah. Like he can stand on one hand. He is like,
unbelievably strong upper body, as you would expect. You've got...
torso, the living torso.
The torso, man.
The living torso, that's his name.
So Prince Randian, born without arms or legs, spoke like 7 languages, but not so much English, weirdly. And like his whole life is a weird mystery. He did marry and had several children.
Yeah, I guess his son generally carried him around. So
yes.
Yeah, on set, they said his son was there and carried him around.
So if you were wondering, there you go. You know, he's only missing the arms and the legs there.
Well, he has a line. So there's a scene that he lights.
He has one line in the movie.
He lights and smokes a cigarette. And I guess that scene was cut down. I guess he rolled the cigarette as well. And
he does roll it in the cut that I saw.
Oh, not in the one that I saw, but
okay. Yeah, it was a famous thing that he did in his act. He could roll. He could also shave. He did a lot of things like that was basically his act. See this man with no arms and legs.
But
things.
His line is something like, I could do it all with my mouth or something like that.
Now you can do anything with eyebrow.
Oh, that's funny. I honestly couldn't understand what he said because of his accent. I
so
just
was
like,
can.
Okay.
So this is a
thank God it's not just me.
No, that's not just you. Like people go back and replay it, but there's a caption. Oh no, and then I asked like, but how did the caption come to exist? Because like it's not like this movie was created and they made subtitles for it. Like somebody interpreted his line in order to create a caption.
Yeah.
So anyway,
maybe. You've got a number of pinheads in the movie. Most famously Schlitzie, if I'm not mistaken. Schlitzie, they don't really know who Schlitzie's parents were. They don't know where Schlitzie came from. They know that Schlitzie was probably sold into a freak show and then bought and sold by other freak shows. To some extent, like, this is from a time when, like, the loving relationship you see between the freaks and stuff like that was a good place to be for a lot of people. There were not social services or anything, you know, like
50 years before this, you would have been left out to die in a
or
lot
something
of
like
places.
it. Yeah, exactly.
That's also true of Violet and Daisy Hilton were also sold by their parents.
Frances O'Connor, the armless girl. Peter Robinson, the human skeleton. Another armless girl, Martha Morris. Many things cut from the movie. And I don't know that I ever got a breakdown on it, but it was like about sexual things. I think I have a hunch that a lot of it centered on the relationships that the conjoined twins in this movie find themselves in and the implications of that.
So it's in there a little bit. And that's true to their life. They're very interesting people. Like, they were put up for adoption, but like literally sold into a sideshow, and did that for years, traveled for years. I guess their manager just like left them in a movie theater at one point, was just like done and abandoned them, and so they got jobs working in the town at a grocery store. Eventually they both died of the flu, sort of tragically.
Jesus.
It sounds like one died a couple days before the other, which is horrific. But they also were married, and they were married to gay men.
Well, that
they all lived
works.
together. So that was the thing. I think they were probably married for monetary reasons.
Of course. And to gay men actually doesn't raise the questions, probably. I mean, maybe unless they were all drunk and having a nice time.
Or to whoever it's raising questions with, they're like, I don't care. Just all you freaks go live together.
Well, no, but what I mean is in the movie, that's not what's going on, of course. In the
Slightly
movie,
implied.
there's an implication here that there's going to be marriage consummation and that there will be, by necessity, extra parties to that. The thinking about that in the minds of the people who are watching these test screenings and stuff like that is what freaked them out and made them cut a lot of the movie. It's just my hunch.
Because they leave in there that they don't have to have it by any means. So the first one has her fiance. I think it's Daisy has a fiance, and that's a contentious relationship. And then the other one is also becomes engaged during the movie.
To our stuttering guy.
No, that's the first one. That's the
you're right.
engagement going in, and he's always
To Roscoe.
annoyed at the other sister for like taking his wife out and being hungover. He's got a whole thing about how
she's always hungover.
His wife can't get out of, or his fiance can't get out of bed because she's hungover. And, and so she also gets engaged, and the men meet briefly in a scene, and they're kind of like, oh, you should come over. It's a little flirty. I took away that like they were both very comfortable with this arrangement.
Well, you have to be.
I would imagine. I mean, I don't know if the cut footage was pushing that relationship and pushing if there was a scene of all of them in bed or something like that. I could absolutely see that being something that.
Well, what I know is that there was stuff in this movie that audiences like were basically running out of the theater with pitchforks about. So test audiences. So they cut like 30 minutes from the movie.
Yeah. But then I guess like the test audience did that, and then they showed it one more time because I guess they already had their theater for the premiere and everything was already set and they couldn't cancel it. And I guess it like blew up after that because, or not like blew up. It was like, it was a packed house. I guess it was like the most people they had in that theater at that point because they billed the screening as the last time you'd be able to see the original movie. Oh. And because it had become so divisive, people like went to go see it. Everyone wanted to see it.
It's a freak show.
Yeah. So it's surprising knowing that nobody
saved that cut.
Yeah, that it doesn't exist anywhere. But I guess,
maybe it does and they haven't found it.
Or that, yeah.
Or it decayed. It did exist and it fell apart.
Right. I was listening to a film historian from the 30s who's basically like, we don't really think about what we lost. It's such a marvel at anything that we have.
Yep.
So
I told you that you're really watching this movie for the third act. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think you have to get to the third act, and I think because it was so cut down, it actually helps the pacing of the movie. It doesn't linger getting there. You find out that he has money, and it's like cut to wedding scene, and there must have been a scene cut there because it's literally like silent film era, which makes some sense because this director made silent films, but it's like the card comes up and it's like the wedding scene.
Yeah. It's chaptered. Like the movie's
table.
got like chapters. Yeah. Hans marries Cleopatra. And at the wedding, she reveals exactly how she feels about Hans.
Right. Well, and you know, because Cleopatra and Hercules are always, he's hiding in her trailer. They're laughing behind his back. They're drinking the champagne he got. Like there's never a moment where you think that like maybe she'll have a change of heart. Maybe she'll come around. Maybe there's a human in there somewhere. She is a villain all the way through.
Yeah.
And
as
so
is
Hercules.
Hercules, yeah. She humiliates him at their wedding.
They're just their laughter was like the most horror in this movie for me.
But she, in turn, experiences we get to see her experience her own personal horror, where the freaks accept her as one of their own, and she like loses her shit. Yeah. That scene, by the way, is fucking weird.
It's famous. Yeah.
It's very famous.
Accept You song. Yeah.
Yeah. Geeble gobble, geeble gobble. We accept you. We accept you. Geeble gobble, geeble gobble. One of us. One of us. And they all have to drink from the big cup.
So good. I love it.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Coco is dancing on the table as the bird girl and stuff. Like, yeah, like it pushes her buttons. She loses her fucking shit. Then to get his money, they're going to poison him, and she's trying to poison him, but he gets wise, and now there's a plot in the works. The circus takes care of its own, so to speak.
Frida's been trying to tell him, they're laughing at you, at you, and he can't see it. And then I expected that he would also sort of fail to see it here, or the next day forget about it, but like he sees it, and like it breaks their code as freaks that they've accepted her, and she blows up like that. It breaks something for him, and it never goes back.
So now they're going to get their revenge. And so it happens while the circus is moving, and it's just absolutely, this is the horror moment because it's the rain and the mud, and the film, it takes on another look. We have this almost chiaroscuro kind of contrast happening.
Well, and building up to it, you're getting like they're watching her all the time. They're hiding. All the time. Like you always seeing them in the background. Like they have their eyes on her.
And we get to some murdering.
They've got the switchblade, and the guy keeps polishing his gun.
Yeah. I love crawling through the mud with the knife towards the camera. Is that Angelo that does that, or was that Reardon? I forget. Randian.
Oh, I thought that was Johnny. Johnny Eck, like the half.
Oh, maybe. I feel awful now, but like it's a scene under the trailer where this guy is crawling through the mud with the knife.
Well, did that scene where there's a scene where you see all of them kind of crawling towards her.
Yes.
Did that remind you of anything?
Any zombie movie of your choice, but
Toy
you give me
Story.
Oh.
With all in Sid's room.
Yeah, in Sid's room. Oh, yeah, of course. And it's a perfect place to put that reference. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm not Toy Story people.
Okay.
I did not come. Yeah, I mean, I've come to really appreciate them now that I have kids. But I did not like Toy Story was not my movie growing up. I was a little old for it when it came out, and it did not really connect for me. It was a kids movie, and I was too old to appreciate a kids movie and not old enough to appreciate a kids movie.
Makes sense. I was just 2 years younger than you, so it was still in the zone for me.
I was like on that line. Yeah. I will say I do think that Toy Story 2 is the best movie in the series. Despite what people are going to say about 3 or 4 or whichever one it is that they now think is the best one. I think 2 is the strongest film.
I'd be surprised people said that about 4. Tarantino very strongly is like, this is a trilogy. The 3 movies was perfect. The story ended. Yes. I will never watch another Toy Story movie after 3.
I mean, and in truth, it does. It's correct, because the 3rd movie the 4th movie does not feel like it's part of the same arc. It's a whole new everything. Anyway.
You can't expect that they have a property that's that franchisable or that merchandisable, and they're not going to continue to push that button.
I thought I knew people who were like in Toy Story 3, in the scene where they're going into the trash heap and they're going to get melted. People who like bawled their eyes out and like lost their shit about that scene. Did not do that for me. I don't have that connection to the characters. For a brief moment, I was like, holy shit, is Disney about to... No, they're not going to kill all these characters.
They built a whole theme park out of it.
Yeah, exactly. We're not in the business of traumatizing children with our children's movies anymore. Those days are long gone.
I don't know. They still kill the parents all the time.
Do they?
Frozen.
Oh, that's true.
I guess they don't kill. It's not in Moana. They kill the grandmother, which is a little less.
Yeah, but she's also like happy about it or whatever.
In
She's like,
are her parents?
We know that her grandfather died before she, obviously before she was born. That movie, man, I got thoughts about that movie.
I know we should cover it at some point. But
that movie has a very weird, to me, it has a very strange political position. I read too much into these modern Disney movies. I know, because like I watch the water one that you just mentioned, Moana. Yeah, I'm not into it because of the whole encouraging of the voyaging over the horizon and stuff, because like I know
they discourage it.
Well, but the movie encourages it.
Okay.
To the movie, it is a moral good. But like that's a one-way trip in real life. Like historically, you get on those boats, we would have a funeral for you. We're never going to see you again. And I hear that in the song where she's talking about the great unknown, and I'm like, there's only one. In all of poetry, the great unknown means one thing. So like, what is this movie? I don't know. It just freaks me out. I don't like it. It's just something in there about like. I feel like it's an encouragement of like a death instinct or whatever.
You're in a world where there's like gods and entities that can bring her home.
Maybe.
Yeah.
She's the only one who encounters those, like society around her. Anyway,
they believe in them. I don't know. Yeah. A different podcast.
They don't believe in them. They specifically don't. Her dad is like, oh my God.
Does.
Yeah, she's the crazy one though.
Yeah,
that's the whole
true.
point. Everybody else on the island is like, okay, her fucking stories again. We're talking about Freaks, not Disney.
No.
We're talking about Freaks. So,
all right,
yeah,
so they're crawling through the mud. We got there because I took us to Toy Story, but
I don't think we see what they do to her, but we know they get her.
So that's a cut scene, I guess. One of the scenes that I was looking, I saw a thing about alternate endings, and something that I saw is that a tree was supposed to have fallen on her and trapped her, and then a tree was supposed to have fallen on her and trapped her, and then you see them all crawl up to her and start to pick her apart.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
At least
and I think that they do stab Atlas, right? Or sorry, Hercules. He gets like stabbed to death, right?
Throws a knife. I don't think you see him die. I don't know if you.
But we know that guy can throw a knife like a motherfucker at that point in the movie. Yeah. So okay, we do some murders. And then, of course, Hans and Frida get back together. All is forgiven. Joy, joy, happy, happy. Then we get back to our framing
That
story.
was also an added scene.
Oh, interesting. They weren't supposed to get back together.
The test audiences didn't like that Hans was left as this sort of unredeemed. He'd gone bad, which...
Okay.
To me, it's like he's bad in a different way from the scene where he like... is just like, oh, something more pretty or something more interesting. And I understand his motivations are to be liked, and he's never been felt accepted and all of those things. And so I can sympathize with that for sure. I don't think he's just bad, but like he gets his comeuppance for not listening.
But the penance is paid? Is that like like he's paid the penance?
I think I guess they didn't want him to have this woman to have made him evil. And so there's two versions of the ending. One is that you just see Frozzo and Venus sort of reintroduce Frida into Hans's life and sort of walk away, and they hug and embrace. And the second is she actually says to him, you just wanted to get the poison from her. You didn't want that other stuff to happen. You just wanted the poison. It's not on you. Like, they did that. You didn't do that.
And then we find out what happened to her.
Well, this is even after you find out what happened to her.
It is?
It's stuck at the whole end of the movie.
Yeah, but no, the final shot, if I'm not mistaken, is seeing her at the bottom of that pit. There are some versions where that is the ending. There's 3 different. And then there's 2 versions that have this sort of epilogue on the end of it. He's been alone for years. He's isolated himself. He's punishing himself. And Frida comes in and absolves him of his guilt. Well, I remember that scene happening, but I thought that we see the results of their revenge after that.
The only reason I don't think that's the case is because Ray was like, when this other ending came out, I was like, what is happening? That's how the movie ends.
Okay.
But maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe there could even be versions of it that are cut.
Put in different orders.
I mean,
maybe we both saw a different cut.
It's been recut in different ways. Yeah.
But when we see what has happened to her, she is a beaten, senseless, armless, legless person who's had like feathers attached to her and a beak, and she just lies at the bottom of this basket going,
I think they call her Duck Girl at this point or something like that. Like the movie lore calls her Duck Girl.
So they accepted her, and then they made her into a freak, whether she liked it or not. And she didn't. And so that's it. She just has to spend the rest of her life as, in a basket, basically.
So I guess this is based on a short story that takes place in France, which is why the movie takes place in France. And the ending of the short story is that it's called Spurs, the short story.
Yes.
And the ending is that he actually tortures her for the rest of her life. Hans does. And his name's not Hans in the short story, but that's
okay.
Doesn't matter for the points of this conversation. But he makes her carry him on her shoulders all the way to the coast, which I guess someone was talking about this, saying that would have been
while
like
he's wearing
1,000
spurs.
miles. While he's wearing spurs and kicking her
God.
to keep going.
Oh my God.
He just tortures her.
Wow.
Forever.
You know what's weird about that? Okay, so I was talking about Angelo being in this, and also being in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Excellent film. It's not really. The character he plays is two characters. It's Master Blaster, and he is the master, who is the brains of the operation, riding on the back of this enormously strong guy who's not smart, Blaster. And so together they're Master Blaster. Yeah, and never mind. I don't know. I was seeing like a weird connection there with like the riding. Yeah, but like that's not there.
All right, fair enough.
What do you think of this movie?
I really liked it. I'm glad it exists. I think that instead of calling it an early horror movie, I would call it like an early cult classic.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, because to me, like a cult classic is something that takes, John Waters, takes the while Hollywood at this time is building these beautiful ingenues and making everything look pristine, cult takes the misunderstood, the uglier sides of things and celebrates those.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to call it uglier, the less accepted, the cast aside. If you think of the great cult classics, you've got Rocky Horror Picture Show, you've got Hedwig and the Angry Inch, you've got, there's tons of those are the ones in my life. I'm sure people are out there screaming this.
You might be reaching for exploitation as a genre. Because cult classic isn't really, I'm going to be a jerk here, it's not really a genre, it's a thing that happens. It's a thing
that happens. I would not necessarily call it a genre.
I think you were reaching also for Midnight Movie, and I would agree with that.
Maybe, but so this didn't actually really even find its audience until the 60s. I guess they found the print and they re-released it at Cannes, and then suddenly it was being celebrated, where it had just sort of been cast aside before. So it feels more in that world to me than it feels like in a horror world to me.
I agree. I mean, you're getting into also like what we were saying before, where it's like horror was barely, was horror even horror back then too? Like you think about Dracula, which is Todd Browning's other movie, the only reason I bring this up, which is boring.
Yeah. You were talking about Frankenstein being boring. Dracula, oh my God.
Yeah. I would much rather watch Freaks than Dracula.
Agreed.
But but Dracula is horror. Is it horrific? Is it scary? You know what I mean? No.
Yeah.
It's unsettling, and I think that you get kind of the same thing here. It's not so much that this is not a horror movie, maybe, but that horror meant something different back then than what it came to mean.
I think also, coming back to the cult thing, Todd Browning, I think, was trying to show these people to the world and their abilities
yes,
to entertain. And he puts a scene in this movie that we didn't talk about with sort of the caretaker of the Pinheads, and he's got the clown character, I think, talking to one of his friends, and is
Frozo,
whoever's property they're staying on, and this guy is really uncomfortable with having these people on his property. And there's a woman who's taking care of all these people outside, and they're playing, and he sort of chases them into her arms by scaring them. And at the end of that scene, she tells them, what do I tell you? Never be afraid of these people.
Yes.
How many times Have I told you not to be frightened? Have I not told you God looks after all his children?
Yeah, and there's another guy with him who kind of comes to their defense, who's like, another outsider. He's like, oh, no, these guys are fine. Leave them alone. Yeah, actually, I wanted to bring that up. Thank you for bringing that up, because I really liked that moment, and I think that is the soul of the film right there, actually. And you're right. I think that this is a movie that was made with love. I don't think this was made...
I don't think it's exploitative.
Of the freaks, right. No. Yeah, I agree.
Now, if I find out that they were like abused on set and they didn't make any money and whatever,
you got to whip them.
Yeah,
you got to whip them to make them work. No, I think in fact that for like some of these people like made more money doing this movie than they ever made in their fucking lives. I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think I read somewhere about what like Hans and Frida were making, and it was like, oh, okay. Good for them. Also true for in The Wizard of Oz. I don't know why, but like the Wicked Witch, she made like the actress who played the witch, man, she made tons of money working on that for the time. She was making like $2,000 a week. And then I think they shot for 22 weeks. They had her. That's a shit ton of money. I think it's goes to exactly what I love about pre-code in a lot of ways, which is that we have this idea that like, oh, the world was so innocent in yesteryear. It was an innocent time. It was, the fucking make America great again bullshit, like that idea. But that was only, I was born in the 80s. That was my grandparents' time. My grandparents were born in the 20s. They were raised in a censored world. Their parents' time was not a more innocent time. They came up, they were living it up in the roaring 20s, right? So, as opposed to being born in the 20s. I love looking at movies from this time period and seeing a much more honest reflection of the kinds of conversations people were having, the stuff that society was engaging in, a much more real, I think it gives you a different understanding of the 20th century than you would have otherwise. Here you see real actual relationships, like an abusive relationship, premarital sex, infidelity, and like all of these things that are happening.
It's just people being people.
Yeah, exactly. The entire concept of accepting people who don't look like you, who are not like you, is at the heart of this movie. And accepting yourself too, by the way. To the extent that you could have done that message post-code, it would have been done in a really patronizing way. Just like, you know what I mean?
Oh, it's the difference between, gosh, I have an aunt I really don't like, but we were talking about different people, and we were specifically talking about how religious people are mean to people. And she was like, there's this girl at our church, this teenager, and she's pregnant. Everyone was so nice to her. And I'm like, that's what you think that life is.
That you have to be nice to her.
Yeah. And the fact that like you clocked that you were actively being nice to her, as if she has done something to deserve you not being nice to her.
Exactly.
Like, that is what we got from post-code to like whenever.
I think so.
That like,
I think so.
Just makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. I'm with you 100% there. Yeah, you think this is
a shining example of you being a good person.
Right. Exactly. No, I think that hits the nail on the fucking head right there. So I think that so much of the tone, certainly the inclusion of the freaks in this movie, the appearance of them on film, impossible. I am quite certain could not happen post-code at all.
For many, many years. Many.
Yeah. Except for maybe like if you made a movie about a circus, you might have non-speaking lines of there they are over there in the background or something, like a quick shot. You would never have them be characters. It'd be impossible.
Right. Like I'm thinking about like Hitchcock movies or anything like that. I was thinking like we've done pre-code, get you back to your point, but we should talk about a Hitchcock film next, because we're like right in the middle of code horror.
Yes. Yeah, there are.
What he did about that, how he created through that.
There are great movies from the quote code years, and I've cited before that like I think film noirs are a standout. Like there's a kind of a continuation of the frankness to some extent of the Warner Brothers movies of the pre-code. Hitchcock made great movies during the code. Honestly, I think my favorite Hitchcock movie is North by Northwest, which is not the one most people cite. Not particularly a fan of his horror effort, not horror, but whatever, his thrillers, whatever you call them.
You don't like Psycho, you don't like Birds, you don't like...
I don't like Birds. I think that Birds is a movie that, honestly, it feels like a self-parody at this point.
I loved Birds. It was. I actually watched it for the first time recently. It's not one of his that I'd seen. It was much better than I expected.
There's like a bit in an episode of Family Guy, I think, where Stephen King is with his publisher's office and he's like pitching his new book, and the publisher is just like, "What have you got for me, King? Everything you make is gold. What have you got?" And he's like looking around the office. He's like, it's and he just sees his lamp. He goes, "Lamp. It's Lamp, the book, and it's about a killer lamp." Like, that's how Birds feels to me. Just like they're birds. There's and they're gonna get you. Woo, the birds.
What about, is Night of the Living Dead? That was the 50s.
No, 60s.
60s. Okay. So
and it flies under the code by being an independent film.
Okay.
That like had a real kind of like limited self-financed release, and it was made by early 60s. Oh shit! Now I gotta look. Maybe it's post 68, but. Yeah, but I mean, I think that's a good movie. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, just other things to cover. I didn't mean to take us off the rails, but I really think like if we're kind of going, I like sort of this walk through horror history that we're doing in this conversation.
Night of the Living Dead. Sorry, I do want to point out Night of the Living Dead came out in 1968, the year the code was broken.
Okay, so that might be a little bit a Hitchcock film, solidly in code. Definitely good movies. I think Psycho now. I haven't watched...
you do know that Night of the Living Dead is not a Hitchcock movie, right?
No, I do know that. I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. But
just checking.
I do know that. Psycho. I want to rewatch Psycho, kind of having looked further into the code, understanding fully what that means while that movie is made, because there are pieces in my head where I'm like, how did they get away with that? How did they get away with it? And I really want to watch it under that lens.
Because he's gay.
Norman.
Yeah, I think that part of that, he's a gay coded character. And I think that part of the way that Psycho gets away with it is because of that.
Save it for a Psycho episode.
Yeah, for sure. But I just wanted to say that he's the villain, and that's, I think, how you get away with what that movie was doing.
Okay.
I think.
I hear that theory. I'll take that in with me.
Yeah. And also, when did Psycho come out? Just out of curiosity. I'm not even sure now. I think The Man Who Knew Too Much is 1960. I like that Hitchcock remade his own movies. he made The Man Who Knew Too Much. He made The Man Who Knew Too Much in the 30s, and then he remade it in the 50s or 60s. Yeah. It's crazy. And there's merits to both. I like the original better because it's got Peter Lorre in it, and I fucking love Peter Lorre. He is, I love Peter Lorre. M. Have you ever seen M?
No.
It's a German movie with Peter Lorre in it, made before he came to America to make movies. And it's probably the movie that got him into Hollywood, but like he plays the villain in it. It's a crazy movie. It's about a guy who goes around murdering children and a town trying to get rid of him.
Yikes.
The city trying to get rid of him. But like it's a very influential film. I don't know if I got a whole lot more to say about Freaks, except that people should see it. It's a really cool piece of film history. It's a good look at the kinds of stuff that you could have seen in 30s before we decided you couldn't see those kinds of things anymore, before we decided it was unfit for human consumption.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of to imagine going down this road like this Frankenstein doesn't really give you the pre-code like imagination of like where our society could have gone if we didn't like pretend that everything's perfect and beautiful and men and women get married and have babies and none of them have abnormalities and everything is wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved this movie. I really did. Thank you for bringing it into my life.
Oh, I'm glad you loved it. I don't love it that much. I
don't. It's not like I'm going to sit down and watch it again next Halloween or anything. But like, I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad that there is like a documentation of the people who were in this movie because we didn't get into a ton of the stories, but their stories were so interesting to read as I was sort of learning about.
No, like I was talking about Schlitzie
of this movie, for
example, and Prince Randian, where like for some reason they don't know where he came from. Is like weirdly mysterious. I think he came from South America or something, and he was like venerated as like a
who's
god.
Keeping track of these people? No one.
Yeah, exactly. There's no birth records. They don't know who their parents were. Right, exactly. Yeah. There was barely any of that for anybody, but like especially these guys.
I wanted to say like Todd Browning is like a good version of Barnum. People love to make Barnum like this hero.
They do?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I like The Greatest Showman, which I'm not going to pretend I don't love that movie and the music in it. But
God,
like,
I hate that movie. I fucking hate that movie.
I know you do. And I expect
I
you
hate
to.
that movie.
But like, Barnum, like, made this black woman like his slave and put her on display.
He's also famous for saying there's a sucker born every minute.
He was awful and probably really, really mistreated the people that were working in his circuses. So I think that should be on the record more, and I think people should be very clear about that.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit. I didn't know that was in question. I thought everybody knew that he was a horrible monster.
We're ending the episode. I'm being eaten by my camera.
All right. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Do get your podcasts. Get Midnight Local wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all so much, and good night, and good luck, and subscribe and like, and leave a comment. Leave a comment.
Bye-bye.
Happy Halloween.